Hello, I'm Tony Power, the founder and principal consultant at Just Culture Consulting based in Melbourne, Australia. And joining me once again is Paul Stretton from the UK, one of the most innovative thinkers in the area of Just Culture. Welcome, Paul.
Tony, good to see you again.
So today we're going to be looking at the revised model of Just Culture. This model tries to take some of the best elements of the classic and restorative models that we've discussed in previous videos, and to then bring those all together. There are a number of different revised models out there, but the specific one that we're going to be discussing in today's video is one that Paul has put a lot of work into developing. I really like this model. It's one of the main reasons that I was really keen to do this video series with Paul. So Paul, how does the revised model of Just Culture work, and how does it draw from the classic and restorative approaches?
Thank you, Tony, and that's very kind of you to say. So I appreciate that. And I guess I started looking into this, having worked with a range of organisations that had bought into the James Reason's classical vision, but had difficulty in terms of translating that into practice and really getting rid of that sense of fear and blame. And that got me curious. And there's some different approaches or ways in which we can bridge that gap a little bit. And I also thought there was a lot of merit in seeing Decker's work around that restorative approach. But as we talked about last time, not convinced that it's a complete answer or works for all people at all times. So I set about trying to create a broader perspective of Just Culture. And it was, there are four pillars to this revised approach. The first one being the importance of learning over liability. Now, James Reason argued that if we get a culture that is fair and just, then that will lead to an organisation developing a learning culture. And unfortunately, the evidence is that that doesn't happen. So we need to reset that balance, and the emphasis should always be on learning and improvement. The second piece is probably one of the more significant changes from the previous approaches, and that is we need to stop being reactionary. These days, thanks largely to the brilliant work of Eric Holnagel and the idea of Sector 2, is we recognize that we don't need to wait for failure to have a learning opportunity. And we prioritize and value learning from everyday work as well. Despite this, the approach to Just Culture remain very much reactionary. And they only are interested in responding to failure and have nothing to say about an overwhelming proportion of our work, which is good and safe. So we need to change that. Sidney Dekker, I think, in terms of that restorative approach, that more human, that more relational approach, I think is welcomed and important component to having a true trust and learning culture. I think we should be able to recognize that after an incident, we've got multiple people that are harmed and are vulnerable, and our response can compound that harm if we're not careful, or we can work hard to minimize and mitigate that vulnerability. And also we should recognize that most people are good, professional, well-intended, and we should start on a basis that until we have any information that suggests otherwise, that we might have people that are reckless and dangerous in our midst, that we treat them with that respect that they deserve. And also we need to take a systems-based approach and challenge the power of hindsight in our analysis. Human error is both normal and unintended, but too often we judge people for their fallibility rather than be curious about their work. What was the environment, the context that those decisions were made in, and why did it make sense that we've got a committed professional person making that decision that subsequently we knew was not the optimal decision at that time? So we take that systems-based approach, and those are the pillars that really kind of drive the analysis.
So then taking those four pillars and this broader approach, how would that run in reality? Perhaps we could go through an example.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we've got a broader approach now. So the examples, we've got a little bit more to try to work through and unpack. In our first video, we talked about Volkswagen. I thought it might be interesting to go back to Volkswagen and to see how this approach and this perspective might change our analysis and our thinking. So if we start with the engineers that were falsifying the test results about the emissions, it would not be particularly surprising if there were people that felt that they ought to be punished for falsifying the results. Under the revised approach, we'd recognise that what they were doing, that they knew was not correct. But it was also understandable why they did it, given the pressures from above. And also, we'd recognise that it was a widespread issue. It wasn't just that we had a couple of engineers that had gone rogue, that this was something that was a lot more widespread. So we need to explore that and a lot more compassionately, a lot more respectfully, so that we can really try and understand what those drivers are. And from that, we should identify that this is a consistent issue, leading us to identifying a pattern of behaviour, which would be an optimal systemic learning opportunity. There's something wrong here and we need to address it. If we take the actions of the CEO, Martin Winterkorn, we might get again some different results. So we know from a young age that bullying is not the right thing to do, but I accept that you could argue that for a short term they felt like he was doing the right thing, at least, and at which point you might end up learning from excellence. And I think that might be challenging for some people. So again, it depends very much on how well we learn, and we try and understand the work. And ideally, it would be an opportunity for us to realise that we got to an acceptable outcome, albeit by unacceptable means. So there's still some opportunity to learn and improve, despite the fact that we've been successful in this at this moment in time. Ultimately, obviously, we're not successful, and at that point, we need to look a little bit more. And the idea of compassion, I think, is important. The role of the CEO is not an easy role, given all the different constraints that they're in. So we need to understand why that made sense at the time. Also, though, it's not a widespread issue. Lots of other organisations were not taking this approach. So this is more around individuals and the personal factors, at which point then there are, or I would expect at least, clear processes in place in terms of how we undertake this work. There weren't any ill health or other mitigating factors. And so it does get us to a point around a degree of personal liability and what would then be a reasonable sense of accountability that comes to the CEO for their actions in this situation. So you've said lots of nice things about this kind of approach, Tony, and I'm interested what drew you to this model, and now having looked at this example maybe, and also what you think the potential limitations are of this approach.
I think there are two aspects in particular that I really like about this model. That the first, that in contrast to Decker's restorative model, is that it does maintain a commitment to a fair and just individual accountability that I think is important if you're going to have high performing teams. But that said, that accountability really is comes after you're considering all of the systemic factors that are in play, which I think is really important if you are going to have a fair and just system. And we'll talk more about accountability in a future video. But the second aspect that you touched on, in particular, is a big emphasis on organisational learning. Both the things that go well and the things that go wrong. And I particularly like that the model helps to clarify what kind of events are most likely to facilitate organisational learning, which is good because organisations are frequently, usually resource constrained, and so they need to prioritise where they're able to learn the most. And that emphasis on learning means that, say, compared to a Risonian classic model of just culture, where you might look at, say, the engineers and say, right, they broke the rules in attempting to help the business, so it's an optimizing violation. So we need to look at some more ethics training or something like that. But this model, the revised model, allows us to sort of go a bit more deeper into learning. I think it has more potential there. In terms of challenges for this model or weaknesses, one would be that is also one of its strengths, but is that it's a more complex model. You are trying to balance learning and justice and restoration, various elements, and so that makes it conceptually more complex. It means that implementation is more complex. It's not just a case of just getting a framework and putting it in and bang, you're all done. And how effective it will be, a lot of it will depend on how well you learn as an organisation. So to that is going to potentially be a challenge to overcome. If you wanted to use this model, you have to think very carefully about how you're going to use it and the implementation of it. But that said, that complexity does mean that this model's perhaps ultimate potential is greater than what you would get from perhaps the classic James Reason model.
Now, I think, Tony, I think that's very fair. I think given its broader scope, I think that comes with risk and reward, I guess, on its own. And how well we learn as an organisation, I think, is one of the key components of that. Certainly, some of the organisations that I've worked with are taking this approach. For people that are involved in it, the emphasis on learning is one of the most immediate things that they recognise and are optimistic about, because it does move us away from that sense of fear and blame. And that's one of the things that I'm most optimistic about in terms of this framework.
So before we finish up this video, we wanted to share something with you that Paul and I have been developing behind the scenes that we're really excited about. And that is a masterclass that will help you build a just culture in your organisation. The concept of this masterclass is to help you start 2025 afresh by laying the foundations for a new culture in your organisation with the help of 2 experts in the field. This masterclass involves several online sessions in a small group led by Paul and myself. During this course, you will have the opportunity to define your values and how to express them through Just Culture, define your organization's priority goals and how Just Culture will help you achieve them. You'll have a clear concept of what a just and fair learning culture will look like in your organization, and you'll come away with a strategic level implementation plan for cultural change so that you're ready then to move forward. We've developed this masterclass based on our knowledge and experience in this field. We're designing it to be as relevant and as valuable as possible. That said, if there are any areas of focus where you feel like, I really need some more support in this specific area, please feel free, leave a comment on this video or email us at info@justculture.com.au, and we'll definitely, we'll look at those and if we can incorporate that, we certainly will. Our plan is to launch this masterclass in January 2025. The masterclass is only for a small group so that you'll get the maximum benefit from Paul and I, but it does mean that there will be limited availability. So if you are hearing this and you think this is exactly what I need, I want to introduce Just Culture, but I just need some help in getting started, you can register your interest at www.justculture.com.au/masterclass. And when the masterclass opens for enrollments, you'll be the first to know and secure a spot. In addition, if you do register your interest before we launch the course, we want to appreciate and honour that, and so you'll receive a special early bird discount when the masterclass opens.
Tony, I'm so looking forward to the masterclasses and being able to really get into the detail of some of these things that we've just begun to introduce on these videos. So I'm very, very excited by that, and what a great way to start 2025. And before that, then I suppose, firstly, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Tony, for your time again today. If you like this video, please share it, leave a comment. If there's anything that you'd like us to, any questions, any comments for future videos, obviously we'd love to hear that as well. Our next video, which Tony, you mentioned earlier, we're going to be discussing something that generates a lot of interest and contention on our various LinkedIn social media discussions, and that is around accountability. Is it the same as blame? Is it different? What do we mean? And how can we address that? And how does this feed in and enhance or potentially limit our approach to just and learning culture? So I'm very much looking forward to talking to you then, Tony, around accountability. But for now, everybody, thank you very much. Have a great day. See you next time.